The Shorekeeper will terminate your enemy, and in this video I'm going to tell you how she works, how to build her, and in what teams to play the Shorekeeper best. So let's get into it. Starting with her kit explanation. Her basic attacks are the usual, except for a heavy attack that allows her to go into a butterfly mode, but in combat you are not using this. The basic attacks will generate forte stacks, but for the rest there's nothing special here. The resonant skill Chaos Theory will just heal the entire team for a good amount of HP, and then also do damage to the enemies 5 times. There's really not that much to say about this ability, however, it is usable in midair, but if used on the ground, you are able to instantly start on your second basic attack after using it. Shorekeeper's Resonance Liberation will spawn the Stellar Realm. The Stellar Realm is essentially a field that will give buffs depending on what stage it is on. After one intro skill, it will provide a crit rate buff, and after a second intro skill, it's going to also give a crit damage buff. These crit buffs are based on the Shorekeeper's energy regen, capping out at 250%. When at 250% energy regen, you'll have a 12.5% crit rate buff and a 25% crit damage buff. Now for the Forte circuit. Shorekeeper's basic attacks and heavy attack are capable of restoring data, and when Shorekeeper has 5 data, her aerial attack or her heavy attack get converted into more powerful versions that will generate more concerto energy. The heavy attack is also capable of grouping enemies, although the range is a little bit mediocre. There truly is nothing else to say about this. For her intro skill, regularly it's just a bit of damage with some healing. However, if you use the Shorekeeper's intro skill when you have a level for the Stellar Realm, instead she'll cast Intro Discernment. This generates more concerto energy as well as dealing more damage, based on the Shorekeeper's HP. Its damage counts as Resonance Liberation, and is guaranteed to crit. Her outro skill will give 2 different effects. Effect number 1 allows you to trigger a perfect dodge after getting hit for up to 5 times. You do not restore the HP you lost, however you do get the benefits of the extra concerto energy as well as the dodge counter. The second effect is a 15% damage amplification to your entire team, which lasts for 30 seconds and does not get cancelled by swap-offs. Shorekeeper's first inherent skill will allow her to revive a teammate if they die, and heal based on 50% of her own HP. However, this will also drain this amount of HP from the Shorekeeper herself. She cannot die from this, however, instead she'll just get drained to 1 HP. The second inherent skill will give the Shorekeeper 10% energy regen whenever the Stellar Realm is up. This also gives 10% extra energy regen to the Rover if they're in the team. However, this is not really relevant in any teams as of now. If you're just trying to build your Shorekeeper for pure damage, the only thing I would level up is the intro skill. However, if you also want healing, I recommend leveling up the Resonance Liberation as well as the Resonance skill, with the Liberation taking priority over the skill. The rest should not be leveled. It's such a minuscule increase that I would say it's not even worth it. So now that you understand how the Shorekeeper works, it's time to figure out what her best weapon is, starting with her signature weapon, the Stellar Symphony. It has a low base attack but makes up for it by giving a lot of energy regen. Additionally, in the passive, it will give 12% HP, as well as a 12% attack buff whenever you use a resonance skill that heals allies, which the Shorekeepers will do. Also, it will give 8 concerto energy whenever the wielder casts their Resonance Liberation. This is the Shorekeeper's best weapon, primarily for the attack buff. The other reasons are not really that major, so if you're trying to get this weapon, it is mainly just because you want that 12% attack. Definitely one of the least needed signatures in the game, however it is a pretty nice increase if you're debating going for it, and know for sure that you don't really want anything that's coming soon. If you decide to skip it, however, that's completely fine, because there's also the R5 Variation. Variation is going to be the second alternative for the Shorekeeper, and the only other one that I would really call good. It also has energy regen, and gives 16 concerto energy after casting Resonance skill at R5, 8 concerto energy if it's only at R1, which is the same as her signature. This can allow for your rotations to actually end up being shorter. However, the signature is still better due to the attack buff. If you truly have nothing else, you can go for Call of the Abyss. It again has ER on its second stat, and after using Resonance Liberation, the wielder will gain healing bonus. However, Shorekeeper doesn't exactly need extra healing, so you're only using this if you really do not have another variation or Stellar Symphony. This really is a last resort option. For her sets, there is one obvious choice with no other that you should be going for, being the Rejuvenating Glow set. It will give healing bonus on the 2-piece, but what you're really aiming for is that 5-piece, giving 15% attack to your team whenever you heal an ally. Shorekeeper should easily have 100% uptime on this, and since her damage isn't really that relevant, assuming you're not S6, you really should just be aiming for this on your Shorekeeper. The team-wide buffs are definitely the best part about it. And for your primary echo, you want to run the Fallacy of No Return for the 10% ER as well as the 10% attack to the entire team. Bellborn Geocologne also works, but Fallacy is better for basically every healer. Now let's move on to teams for the Shorekeeper, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's every team in the game. Except for 2. However, I'm going to be discussing those in detail. Because here's the thing with the Shorekeeper. All of her buffs are incredibly universal, and every single character in the game is able to utilize these buffs. The only way for a character to be better than the Shorekeeper in this team is if they just had more utility, which for most characters this isn't really the case. However, there are 2 characters that don't really use the Shorekeeper as their primary option, and even for one of them it is debatable. This character is Jinshi. Jinshi can also make great use of Farina, mainly because Farina has coordinate attacks within her kit, which will charge up Jinshi's incandescence more. This will help Jinshi when she is doing faster rotations that Shorekeeper simply does not support because she has no coordinate attacks. You see, if your Jinshi rotation is too fast, if using Shorekeeper, you're not going to max out your incandescent stacks, and in those scenarios, Verena can be better than the Shorekeeper. As for Phoebe, it's more so that Phoebe just has a better alternative, being the fact that Spectra Rover can also heal. You can use Spectra Rover as well as Shorekeeper in your Phoebe teams, however this will end up being worse. This is because if you're not running the Spectra Rover on Rejuvenating Glow, the next best bet to run him on would be the Moonlit Clouds. But if you're running Moonlit Clouds, suddenly you want to force the Rover to use their outro skill, which is not efficient for most rotations. So it is better to run a Rejuvenating Glow Rover, but Shorekeeper is still a good option in the team as long as your Rover swaps to a different set. So outside of Jinshi and Phoebe, Shorekeeper is essentially going to be the best slot character for every single DPS in the game, with no other exceptions. But with that out of the way, it's time to look at the Shorekeeper sequences, and oh boy, they're a doozy. First of all, her sequence 1. It will increase the range of her Stellar Realm as well as its duration. This allows you to go for longer rotations with your Shorekeeper teams, with characters like Jinshi or Camellia. The issue with these characters is their full-on loop rotation ends up being longer than most characters, which means Shorekeeper's ult does have a chance to run out. However, if you get S1, this will not be a problem. Additionally, it will make it so the Stellar Realm does not end after casting the Discernment intro skill, making it pretty useful for quick swap teams where you still want to use Shorekeeper's intro skill, but you don't want to destroy the Stellar Realm because you still want to be doing damage before being done with Shorekeeper's rotation. Her S2 will give a straight up 40% attack buff whenever Shorekeeper's ultimate is up. This is the best sequence in the entire game if you're asking me, because oh my lord, do not underestimate 40% attack. That is almost as much as 5 attack percent rolls if they are the average roll. It is the best sequence in the entire game. I'm not taking any other answers for this. The S3 will make it so Shorekeeper generates 20 Concerto energy after casting her Liberation, which can only happen once every 25 seconds. Yet again, this is a really strong sequence, allowing you to make your Shorekeeper's rotation way faster than normal. Sure, you still can't avoid doing the occasional basic attack, but it's just so much free Concerto energy that makes your Shorekeeper rotation way faster than normal. Yet another incredible sequence. S4 will give Shorekeeper 70% healing bonus on her skill Chaos Theory. I'm personally not a fan of this sequence. Shorekeeper's healing mostly comes from her Resonance Liberation, so Chaos Theory ends up just being a tool for some quick heals if you're almost dying, as well as the Concerto energy generation. So ultimately, giving this skill more healing bonus doesn't really do much. S5 will give Shorekeeper more grouping on her third basic attack, as well as her forte heavy attack. While the buffs here are pretty noticeable, especially in Whimpering Wastes, I think the issue more so comes with the fact that you went all the way to S5 for this. This is way too late in the sequence lineup for it to be worth pulling for, unless you just really like the Shorekeeper. Speaking of which, S6 will give Shorekeeper's Discernment intro skill a 42% multiplier increase, as well as 500% extra crit damage. This allows the Shorekeeper to deal a lot more damage with the Discernment intro skill. However, it's still not enough to the point where you can actually start classifying Shorekeeper as a main DPS. It will allow you to nuke waves in Whimpering Wastes, or deal a lot of damage to smaller mobs in Tower of Adversity, but overall I think this is one of the weaker S6s in the game. So did you learn anything from this guide? If so, be sure to like the video as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you still have any questions, you can ask them down below in the comment section. However, if you want to make sure that I respond, be sure to join my Discord, in which I'm pretty active. If you ask your question there, there's a pretty high chance I'm going to respond to you, way higher than my comment section. The link is in the description. But that'll be it from me. Peace.